inspections program. We're going to instead announce an enhanced inspection program that's going to take some time, and that's going to address not just inspecting, but access, some amount of access. I'm guessing there's certain culprit plants that are really difficult to work with, like raspberries and multiflora rose and a couple others that are very specifically difficult to work around. We can't get through them, etc. And I guess what I'm saying is, would you consider, instead of November 22 being project 1 of this program, instead we begin with a real attempt to improve access for inspection?
In lieu of this entire program?
As a starting point, like you've mentioned multiple times, how difficult it is to inspect. I'm just saying, you say that's priority number 1, is that we can't see. Someone else was mentioning, we can't see it, we can't inspect it, we can't grade it. And that seemed to be the number 1 risk, was not being able to see what's going on in a targeted fashion. So I'm saying, in lieu of starting this program, we instead try a period of time where we enhance inspections through some amount of clearing, specific targeting theory, and then see where that gets us.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that if we, improve the access and the visibility to the slopes, that it would be a step in the right direction. I can't disagree with that. But we still have concerns about the trees, and the presence of the trees in the highest risk areas, as we've discussed. I know there's, there's different thoughts on that, and there's many comments here about we should go and look at a few more things before we conclude that that's valid, which we will.
Okay. And Janine's got a great contact for you. I also think if you reached out to the UK, you would find different perspectives on managing canals and canal embankments that involve, beginning with the process of how do we approach this to maintain an effective canal embankment in a way that minimizes or even minimizes impact on or even enhances the natural vegetation that surrounds it. Working with what nature provides, maybe the most cost-effective ground vegetation cover for these embankments. You mentioned if we do a project, I think Rebecca mentioned this, if we do a project and there's lessons to be learned, that we would note those and make adjustments, if that's what you're saying. So I'm saying, from what I've read of the papers that were listed in your materials, that after the first 5 years of embankment work, the failure rate declines 90%. That's from a paper that is in your reports. The first 5 years is when you get embankment problems. Disproportionately, far exceeds all the other things. Now we have these embankments that are 100 years old, and they've only failed from working on them, or in the first fill in 1911 was when there was a breach. So what I'm saying is, wouldn't it be prudent to give ourselves 5 years observing what happened, observing the situation in Brockville, how that unfolds, and the other embankments that you worked on in 2018, 2017, give them a 5-year period to evaluate, learn your lessons, and then take a stab at the next phase.
I think that's, when we think about this flow chart, which is my simplified version of what's in the guidebook. And that's true of the whole deck, by the way. There's a lot more detail in the guidebook. This is just our attempt at making, some of the key points more clear. But what when we get to this bottom oval and we go no, we go to end state 3
talking about taking a look at the projects you did in 2017, 2018 on Brockport and Albion, and evaluating them over a period of 5 years to see if you get new leaks. We could easily get a 9-inch rain event with another hurricane moving up the coast. How does the embankment do there compared to the ones that have natural vegetation? My guess is it's going to struggle. It doesn't have the plants to absorb the energy of that impact. It doesn't have the plants sucking up the moisture, etc. It just has some grass that may or may not be growing because it's difficult to get grass established on these steep embankments. So I'm saying, take a 5-year approach to see did your work. You know, how is it easier to evaluate and inspect it? Now, in my backyard, I'm in Fairport Village on the low side. I get water occasionally. It's my own little version of seeps. But if I look out on it, even though it's a bunch of it's lawn, I can't tell if it's wet or not. I have to get out there with my feet and squish around, and then I go, okay, it's still wet here. Can't mow yet, etc. I'm guessing these embankments that I think are going to be way easier to monitor and not going to be simple. You're still going to have to get your feet down on the ground and check them out. I don't know. That's the one thing you could evaluate. Is it actually easier to inspect these embankments? Or is it the pollinators, etc., that you plant to appease the neighbors? Or good environmental stewardship, whatever you want to say, is it actually easier to inspect them? Ask your inspectors. Evaluate this first 5 years, 5 years on these new projects that you just completed before you attack the rest of the canal. That's my advice. That's my suggestion.
We appreciate that. I hear that there. Thank you for the clarification. So using it like a controlled experiment to know what's improved versus where perhaps it fell short of intention. And, I think that's,
We don't even know. We have seeps, but we have natural vegetation, and the two combined has worked for decades. Now we got a new experiment. We have a completely bare embankment that you're going to maintain that way. Let's give it 5 years. Now you can say, whoa, that's going to compromise public safety. You just compromised public safety for 4 years working on this manual. All right, I don't think you did. I think that's just a bunch of bull, but I'm just saying in your word. All right, the last thing I want to say is about the community threshold. So Rebecca, you just mentioned that there's going to be this whole process. I would argue an improvement to this, even though I don't like it one bit, would be to make the community threshold go away. The whole Erie Canal main matters to everyone in this room. Not just whether or not we have a zoning ordinance on one particular spot, or an endangered species on a particular spot, or all the other little triggers. We care about the whole thing. Treat the whole thing as if it has already reached that threshold. Involve the community. I did 4 meetings in one building. Do you think that actually represents reaching out to the public in New York State about something that everyone values? So it's not effective. Treat the whole thing as if it has already triggered the need to involve the community, the need to give them actual say in what you do. And work with local people. But you may have people from New York City interested in how you manage the embankments that's around there because they bike there all the time. We all care about it throughout the system. Last thing I want to say is just, you showed that graph. As the condition deteriorates, I'll do it for you, the probability of failure increases in those lines. When I first saw that graph, I didn't think of that canal. I thought of the Canal Corporation. I'm sorry to say, that's the first thing I thought of. Putting the corporation in NYPA. Why the ratepayers of NYPA should be paying for the maintenance of the canal system that we all New Yorkers are invested in. The Brockport project and all the mistakes that happened there. The doubling down on the lack of a need to do this whole process. I think my wife discovered there was a need to do the environmental review by just clicking on a Citizen's Guide to Secret. She raised that, and then a week later, John Callahan, remember John, is on WXXI radio, doubling down on the fact that the canal corporation doesn't need to do that. A citizen, I just heard innocent citizens found that they should, and that's why we're here. A failure, I think. The severing of a cable in working in Barrington, a public or private company's cable, another little failure that's going on. And I don't mean to make this personal, but just, but I think the biggest failure is not engaging people like Ginny and Elizabeth and Kevin in the formulation of your plan. They have tried very hard to get involved. They have emailed you. The scientists that Ginny spoke to today, we emailed you that report. We have evidence. I sent it to you in 2017, in November 2017, a summary of her research. I'm sorry. No, I'll try to remember. And I just think this plan would be better. We wouldn't be arguing. We talked about, you don't like how this is all activism and conflict instead of dialogue. We've tried to have dialogue. We've tried to reach out and have discussions. There's a ton of research that my wife, I'm mostly just an innocent bystander in the family with this whole thing, but she's worked her butt off to look at all these different angles and read all these papers. But it's like we're all trying to talk to you, trying to get some input, trying to get some dialogue. And now you say you're going to revise the manual, but you're not going to come back to the community to have us take a look at it, see if it's improved at all, and allow us the opportunity to comment. It's just going to be the manual, and maybe it'll get adjusted as we go. I just see, take a look in the mirror. As the condition deteriorates, it's probably a failure.